Okay, so welcome to all those that are joining us both in person as well as virtually tonight. This is for the Citizen Advisory Committee's December 13th meeting. This is a public hearing and meeting on the 2023 Human Needs Funds. We just are going to do a few quick comments at the beginning to welcome participants and set up procedures for the rest of the agenda. Members of the public wishing to provide comment for discussion during the meeting may email comments to our Community Development Specialist, Vicki Dorway, at vdorway@everettwa.gov. The public may access this hearing through various ways. If you are disconnected or if you become disconnected, I would recommend either visiting our website or taking down the information I'm about to say. You may view the hearing on the Everett TV channel as it is being broadcast tonight, as well as Everett TV's YouTube channel. A recording of this will also be available on the YouTube site following this meeting. You may also call in on the public call-in number at 425-616-3920. There is a conference ID you will need to enter, and that is 724-887-726#. Or you may access this hearing online via Teams through the Citizen Advisory Board's website at everettwa.gov. Additional information on this meeting, as well as the information I just listed, is also available on that webpage. Consistent with human needs funding practices, at the end of this meeting, we will not be accepting public comment on funding recommendations. That is because these are municipal funds. These are not the federal funds. However, should anyone want to connect with city staff further on funding recommendations, you may do so via email again to Vicki Dorway. And again, that email is vdorway@everettwa.gov. So with that, I will hand it over to the chair for roll call and overview.
Thank you, Kimbra. I'm going to take roll first. Sue Johnson.
Present.
Matt Bissell. Josh Bruner. Michelle Martin.
Present.
Samantha Hassan. Christopher Dingle.
Present.
Molly Everhart.
Present.
Larissa Knopp. And I, Susan Mosshart, am here as well. And if the staff would please introduce themselves.
Vicki Dorway, Community Development Specialist. And Kimber Landry, Community Development Manager.
Thank you. Tonight, the rules of procedure will be that I will call on each member personally during our discussion period. Because this is a complex hybrid approach, we ask you to use, if you're virtual, to raise your hand function on your Teams bar so that we can call on you. And if anybody is in person, the two members that are in person, if you would raise your hand, we can call on you as well. We will be able to ask questions and answer questions at the end of the staff presentation as needed. And so I hand it back to you, Kimbra.
Thank you, Chair Moss. So to that extent, we had to do a quick flip of who was signed into the computer. So just give me one moment as we do a technical navigation to where we're going to pull up our.
That might not be. That's
Yeah, I don't think it is either.
Let's go to S Drive. It's in the CAC 2020.
Okay, so I'll pull it up for just a minute and I'm gonna go, oh, we have people still admitting to our lobbies.
I can pump it.
There we go. Okay. Okay, so real quick, we're just gonna go over some basic points that were important to note for this funding round. So again, this was our second time of doing grant applications through Amplifund, which is the online grant management software that the city is now using. It provides a wonderful opportunity for committee members to have been able to both review current applications, as well as if anybody received a previous award, they could look at the previous award that an agency was awarded as well. Just real quick, the city's really looking forward to moving forward with the software and an open data sourcing. And so I can give more updates on what that's going to look like later on in the agenda. To that extent, we did have a similar instance happen this year that was similar to what happened last year, where we had, again, only committee members able to score a few applications. We did not have all committee members score all applications. And so therefore, if an application was not given full review by all committee members, it was given a score that was equitable to the scores, the highest range of scores that we had. So if we had 8 committee members review applications, and on some applications we only had 4 or 5 committee members review, that score was translated as if all 8 reviewers gave it a score. That's the best approach that we had for equitable scoring practices with this funding round. However, with that caveat, I want us to understand that scores may be used as a launching point for discussions. However, we just need to be mindful again of the fact that that was not reviewed by all. And so we just want to have a good discussion that will allow us to come to a good funding recommendation for the proposal that we have in front of us. So with that, we are going to pull up our sheet. We will not be taking, actually, let me just pause real quick. We will not be taking the similar approach that we had for federal and state funding, where we went through and we described each and every application as we did for that. The reason why is because we just want to be mindful of time tonight. However, staff is prepared to provide additional information for any committee member should you have questions, as well as we have agencies available here tonight that can provide further information if a committee member needs to understand the program or the proposal as it was presented. But because we had 23 applications for this funding round, we will not be doing a summary of every application's proposal. We will go through the methodology that staff had for some of our staff recommendations, but just to put that out there, we're not going to go through every single one like we did last time we had a hearing, just for the sake of time. Not that one, this one. Okay. Okay, so we are at this time bringing up, beautiful, our funding recommendation sheet. I'm going to open this up and then share our screen. Technology is a beautiful thing until you have to navigate it. So thank you everybody for your patience on this one. And then let me put the mini up here. Okay. Okay, if I can get a thumbs up or a nod from everyone on viewing the spreadsheet that's in front of us. Okay. So again, for this year, for human needs, we had priorities of housing, homelessness, and specifically because our human needs funds are focused on public service, we also had the behavioral health and substance abuse prevention support that we wanted to prioritize. Human needs funds, though, can cover all basic services for all Everett residents. And so if somebody was not able to meet that priority, they could still apply for this fund opportunity. Just to take a quick moment to look at what we had over $1 million in requests for funds. And what we had available was only $553,000. So obviously we had double requests. We did add an additional $100,000 this year of ARPA funds to this funding pool. So we have a mix of both municipal and federal funds in this funding round. But in putting out more money, obviously that helped to identify more need that's in the community as well. And so you will see that we had a lot more requests, as we typically do with this funding opportunity, than what was available. So this will help us if we want to revisit this page at any point in the future. At this time, staff's going to go through what we did for proposed funding recommendations. And again, the committee may ask staff questions as we go through this. We are asking that if you have a question for the agency, that you hold that until a later time. And we will go through, if you have questions for staff, we can address those during this point in the, at the agenda. Under the homelessness and housing priority, we didn't have too many agencies apply under this priority. And so we have, using the fact that each priority gets an average of what the score is to just have as a starting point for review. We had an average of 131 points for this priority. Everyone that ranged around above that got a recommendation for funding. If someone was below that threshold, then we did recommend them still for funding for meeting a priority need. They just may not have met their full request ask for that. Again, staff funding recommendations can be part of discussion during committee review if you would like to change or adopt any of the recommendations that we have up here.
What's the total points possible?
Oh,
150.
150, yeah. Thank you. Okay, so for Cocoon House Journeys, we see that they scored above average. They met a priority. And so therefore we were recommending them at full funding. DVS did the same of having right above the average score. And they also had a meta priority. And so they got close to what their full ask was. The nuances, the nominal difference of that 179. We can address that if the committee would like to or not. We did see that actually threw us off because we were trying to be consistent with our blanket numbers for everything. But anyway, Housing Hope Teen and Young Parent Program. This one is one that we have funded in the past. They did get below average, and so we did not look at doing their full request. However, they met a priority. Last year, the reduced or the award was only 10,000. Because this one met a priority, though, we did elevate it to be a little bit higher, and it's a staff funding recommendation for 15,000. It was not their reduced request, but it's not close to their 2023 full request either. Interfaith Family Shelter, their scattered site case management, that one was right at average. Because of that, we did not look at getting them their full request ask. This is one that in the past we have funded interfaith through various efforts through smaller grants. This is for an approach for the agency to be able to have one or staff that support all of the functions that we've supported in the past for it. So it's more, the word that comes to mind is aggregate, but that's a little lofty, I think, for describing this. I think that the impact is still there for what they're able to do with it. It's just all in one request as opposed to broken down over a couple. So we looked at providing them at 60,000, right, because they are right at average for their score. And then Red Cross and VOA, these two we did not provide recommendation for. Red Cross got less than the average score, and so we did not move forward on a recommendation with that consideration, as well as just looking at trying to be mindful of, again, the target audience that the funds are looking to support. We have a lot of funding requests that is for chronic homeless. They're for people that have ongoing homeless experience, and this was for displacement, people that are displaced and temporarily homeless due to a fire or other emergency at their house. VOA, this program, the refugee resettlement, had a very high score. The ask was on the higher end for us and considering it. However, when staff looked at the budget for this program, we saw that there was a substantial amount that was given for direct financial assistance for housing placement. When looking at trying to leverage the human needs dollars, we looked at the budget and where an opportunity would fit for these funds to be best utilized. It looked as though the best opportunity or budget line item in the proposed budget was around the moving costs for the refugees, and based on how we could look at that applying to other programs, we had a hard time being able to elevate something that would focus on moving costs as opposed to something that could actually help somebody that's currently experiencing homelessness or otherwise a direct service provision for that. So just for the use of dollars, we just did not recommend funding for that activity. Before I move forward, I guess I can pause here and see if there's any questions from committee members before we move forward. Or Chair, would you like for me to go through the entirety of the spreadsheet?
I would choose for going through the entirety unless there's a pressing question.
Nope, none for the room. Okay. Okay, so moving down, we had our public service for behavioral health and substance abuse prevention support. This one, we have our Bridgeways Mapport Liaison Program, and I'm sorry, I skipped ahead on an important component. This year, we did not separate out Safe Streets funding from our funding pool. In the past, we have, but since we've seen over time that there's a greater response to homelessness efforts throughout various programs within the city, having homelessness as a priority as well as safe streets, which is to address homeless, issues on the streets as well. We just did not see the ability to, or the need to have so much overlap. And so we just maintained it under the homelessness priority as a whole. And so the entirety of the funds were available for competitive application at this time and not a set aside directly for safe streets. I mention that because Bridgeways in the past has been specifically slated to be a safe streets program. Without a set aside for safe streets, though, that puts them back into the competitive funding pool for it. This year, they asked for $50,000 for their reduced, up to $73,000 for their full 2023 request. We're putting them at $60,000. That's because, again, they're right around the average, which was 132.71 for this priority. The $60,000 will cover all of their personnel expenses that was proposed in the budget. However, it's not going up to the full $73,000, which does include some of their overhead and additional program support that they provide for the staff. Child Strives Community Family Counseling for Casino Road program, they were above average. We gave them the full $25,000 that they then requested for. Madres also scored right at average. This one, we ended up giving them the full ask for $25,000, only because, again, of the population that they're serving was a unique population that we felt that the dollars could be leveraged well. For Compass Health and the partnership with Cocoon House, we funded them at their $29,000 ask, which is the higher end of their ask. They did score above average. For Everett Recovery Cafe for the peer support program, they did score below average. However, again, this is meeting a priority, so they got their reduced ask of $15,000. For Reboot, this program was a new program to come to us. They did score the lowest out of this priority ranking. However, for this, the reason why we did not move forward on this is also because after staff review, we would like to see actual accomplishments of practical implementation of their activity in Everett to see accomplishments, and then hopefully they will come back and apply with us again in the future so that we can make a determination of funding based on those accomplishments. And YWCA, this one was one that did score the highest out of this ranking. This one, though, and this can be up for committee discussion further, but this one we decided to fund it only at $30,000 and not the $39,000 that was requested. We were a little, in looking at the population to be served for this, it seems as though this is a good space for parents to be able to meet children in a safe and supportive environment. However, we were not able to understand whether or not that would be Everett-specific residents that would be served by it, and so we limited our award to only $30,000 for this proposal. And again, I will pause at this time to see if the committee has any questions for staff on this priority. Hearing none, Chair, if it's okay with you, I will move forward. And last, we have our public services that did not meet a priority, but still applied, still good work. So we have the ARC of Snohomish County. This program, we see that they scored above average, which was 132 for just general public services. I will say real quick that the score average for this, you will see that there is one agency that scored very low. That we excluded that out of the average for the score that was drawn only because when we included it, it skewed the scores because it was such a low outlier for the range of scores that we had that, and based on it being such a low score, we just weren't recommending it for funding, so we pulled it out. If the committee would like for us to readjust that, we can. But again, it was the lowest scored application that we had out of all of our proposals that were submitted. So again, to go back, so ARC of Snohomish County, we recommended them at 25,000. Yes, they were above the average score. However, in their current award, we've seen that the 35,000 has not been fully utilized yet. And so we would like to propose that the committee consider a award allocation that's more consistent with what the agency is currently utilizing for this exact program. For Cocoon House Hot Meal Coalition, this one was a very high ask. The reduced ask was also the highest that we have. This is one that's similar to the Interfaith Case Management Program. This program has had two proposals submitted in the past. And so this is a cumulative of it being under one proposal. The previous proposal was for both contractual labor to manage the coalition as well as for food expenses. This proposal included the same as well, but because the coalition does not have its own 501c3 status, they do have to have a fiscal sponsor included in there. And so the additional costs for this that we see include both expenses for food, which have gone up because of inflation, as well as for the fiscal sponsor to be able to actually carry forward the program as well. Helping Hands Hope Alive program. This is a new program that came to the committee. They did score below average. Based on the way that the budget was presented, we looked at how to best utilize funds. The budget was very extensive in its proposal. We are recommending funding them at 20,000, which is their reduced request. However, staff would then work to actually ask if the agency can then accept it, restricting the funds to be for service delivery only and to having it to support service provisions for the program. For Homage Community Table Dining at Carl Gibson, this is again another new request that we received. They did receive over the average. But we are funding them at 25,000. That program, we're aware that the Parks Department has worked with this program in the past. 25,000 seems to be around where the actual operations for the program have been. However, you know, we can hear from the committee if there's, or hear from the agency if there's any other additional considerations for that proposal. For Housing Hope Child and Family Specialists, this one we did fund them. They were above the average. However, Housing Hope was one of the only ones that provided two proposals against this funding opportunity for their own programs. And so therefore, because this program did not meet a priority, we funded them at the $10,000 reduced ask, whereas the other one did meet a priority, so they got moved to the $15,000 allocation. Millennium Ministries has the same consideration as Helping Hands did, where they had an extensive budget. In looking at it for staff review, while this was below average, we did focus on the fact that they are doing a good service delivery provision. And so we are going to ask that the agency consider accepting a provision of restricting the fund use to be only for service provision or service personnel. In this instance, it's probably going to be for their consultants that come in and help with some of their programs. Again, for Sharing Wheels, unfortunately, this one received the lowest score. And so based on just lowest score as well as not being a priority, we did not move it forward for funding. I will just mention real quick that this program has received CDBG funds in the past, but this is the first time I'm aware that they come back after a pause of applying for city funds, and then they fell under the Human Needs provision or Human Needs Fund opportunity instead. For Snohomish County Legal Services, this one is again another one where they made above average for their score. However, they did not meet a public service with this one. This is for their family law clinic, which can include both custody or other kind of family civil matters, as well as some guidance for bankruptcy or other mediation needed. So this one, we've recommended funding them at their reduced request. And then for St. Vincent de Paul, for their bus and gas passes, again, right below average, but in considering the target population that they're working with, again, it's for chronic homeless and for persons sleeping in their vehicles. And so city staff recommended them at 10,000 for that proposal. I will say, just real quick before I completely release this over, this was, it's funny because you think that in getting more money, it's going to be an easier opportunity for you to be able to review and give more money out to everybody. However, it was extremely difficult for us. We recognize that all of these agencies do fantastic work. However, when looking at who to fund and how to work with this, we are both trying to leverage this funding opportunity, the dollars of this program to be able to move forward as best as possible in its utilization. We are also looking at how can we help to allow for agencies that may not be new to public funds to help to navigate the nuances when it comes down to public funding, understanding that we still have to balance who it is that we want to uphold and benefiting from the service provision of this. So looking at the desired demographics of who we're looking to support in the community. So there's a huge balance of factors in addition to the scores that were provided and previous award utilization. So this is not something that we take lightly. This is a very difficult process for staff to work through. I know it's a difficult process for the committee to work through, but we just want to thank all agencies for having to submit applications as well as for actually doing the good work in the community that you're doing. So for that, I will leave this now open for not just this group, but also for any other committee questions that the committee members might have. Yeah, we have a hand raised in the room, Chair.
I see committee member Johnson has a question.
Yeah, well, it's not a question, it's a comment.
Comment, but I can't hear her.
Oh, can you hear me now?
No.
All right, my comment is to the committee, and given that we are putting high leverage on scoring, now, it's odd that I'm saying this as this is my last meeting that I will participate in. However, I think it is important to stress highly moving forward that if we are willing to serve on this committee, then it is very important to follow through, not only to come to the meeting, but also to take the necessary time to score items, because otherwise, you know, when we're using that as a criteria, and I thank the committee for making an effort to make it equitable for the ones that didn't get scored. And if it's not possible to meet those criteria, then committee members should consider whether it's viable to continue to serve. And again, I thank all of my colleagues that have worked so hard over these years I've been on it. I just think that's a real priority that we need to address in coming months, and I won't be here to state that later, so I'm saying that. And thank you, committee, for taking all the factors into consideration, because as we all know, it's very hard to say no to many. So I'll try to keep my comments brief throughout, but I just thought it was important to make that note for future consideration.
Thank you, Sue. Are we gonna have the questions, comments by each funding priority? Is that?
We can, if that's, you know, if we have any other, we can go by priority. We can kind of leave it open to see if any other committee members have any questions. This is still just for staff though at this time. So if there aren't any other questions for staff, we can open it back up for just general committee funding discussion. But I can give it back to you at this time, Chair, for you to lead into the next agenda item.
I'm happy to just wait and see if anybody has any questions for staff.
Chair, I'll ask a question.
Okay, wonderful.
So just curious about the VOA request for refugee resettlement funding. You had listed the moving costs. And my question is that, did the agency provide us any sort of information on, you know, these folks are obviously moving a great distance. Is it covering them the cost of moving from where they're being pulled from Ukraine, or is it moving them across country, or is it moving them within our city?
Good questions. If it wasn't
From what I understand, I mean, when I was reviewing some of it, it's not to move them from Ukraine. It's, once they're here, it's helping some of the costs to get settled into whatever housing they are able to find. So
we do have the agency with us
Yes.
tonight, though, so they can come up and provide comment if at that time. So.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. That's the end of my question, Chair. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you for asking. Are there any other additional questions or comments for the staff? Okay, now I think we're to the part where we can talk about funding recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
And I like it when we do it based on the funding pools.
When you say that, you mean by category, correct?
Correct. Like starting like there, the homeless housing category.
And clarification?
Yes.
The number, in your staff recommendations, you have, like, say for the housing, the grand total is 139,200. So how did you come up with what that number? I mean, working backwards, but, each category has a bottom line number. And so is that number static, or can we adjust that?
So Commander Johnson's bringing up a good point. In the past, what has been done before we scored anything, the committee used to have just looking at, how many funds were pulled or were requested under a certain priority. We would try and stay relative to that percentage of what was requested for that priority. This year, we do not have that restraint because we have the scoring mechanism as part of the guidance for looking at funding recommendations. So at that point, if we would like to have the homelessness and housing category, for example, be given more funding than the 139,200 that is proposed there, we can absolutely do so.
But then we have to take some.
Absolutely, yes. Yep. Yeah, as it is right now, all funds, so if we go back to the summary sheet, all funds, this does not pull in the staff recommendation, but all funds of the available amount of 553,200 have been allocated. And so as we go through and we make committee recommendations, this number over here and the amount remaining will start to go down. So as you adjust any of the staff funding recommendations, just know that will create an adjustment later on to be balanced. So.
Okay, so I still have a further question on the math side of this. And so in each category that you said you didn't do it based on
percentage, yeah.
So how did you come up with the number that in each category?
It's just a summation of the requests or the award recommendation above.
So you went through and recommended what you thought, and then you had to adjust accordingly as so you played them all against the grand total initially.
Correct, because again, we have no set aside for safe streets, we have no set aside for priorities, so everything is in a competitive open pool for this year.
Okay, well, that helps to clarify, because then that means this number is actually more fluid than it usually would have.
Correct.
Molly Eberhardt has a question.
Oh, I don't have a question. I have.
Oh, you have your hand raised. Sorry,
you have a comment. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So on the first category of homelessness and housing, I really wanted to encourage us to think about funding the Red Cross disaster assistance. I know the rationale for that was that it's sort of temporary dislocation due to disaster, but I thought the application made a really good argument for the fact that that sort of catastrophic expenditure for families just on the border hanging on can actually lead to permanent recurring homelessness. And so I thought that was actually a really good candidate for preventing homelessness, even though it doesn't focus on families who are already homeless. So I would definitely encourage funding that at the full amount if possible. That relates to a second recommendation, which is that this has to do with all three of the buckets, but to me, it seems that if the third category is a bucket of recommendations that do not meet priorities, I would automatically sort of de-emphasize those compared to the first two categories. And so when I suggest that we do fund the Red Cross, I would suggest we do that by reducing some of the spending from that third category of unprioritized areas. That's all.
Thank you, Molly. So are there any other comments or questions based on this first category?
We have a hand raised in the room.
Okay, thank you. I can't see very well.
Chair, it's Member Dingle. Thank you, Chair. So I would like to also make a recommendation that we fund, at least at the reduced request, the VOA Refugee Resettlement Program. I'm happy to go through some of the logic behind that, but I'd say, without getting into some of the scoring aspects, first and foremost, the Everett area and the Snohomish County region at large is a hub for not just the Ukrainian community, but the Slavic community. The cost savings of bringing people here who have cultural, religious, familial connections is huge compared to resettling somewhere where they may not have those connections. I've been dealing a lot with the Ukrainian community, both working in Congressman Larson's office, and then also just where I live in South Everett, there is a very large Ukrainian community. They are bringing in their family members. They're having them sleep in, on the floor of their homes. They're renovating their garages. I strongly recommend we do whatever we can to fund them.
Committee Leader Johnson, I would like to concur with both the recommendations of including the Red Cross and the VOA in that homelessness is our highest priority, and yet it has the least amount of funding in this cycle. And each of those programs meet unique needs that aren't met elsewhere. So while I understand the committee had, to cut from somewhere, it doesn't seem like to me these are the right spots to cut. So I concur with you and to, it was Molly who suggested that we find a way. I don't know which funds we should cut later on as we go through. We can figure that out, but I would also concur that at least some portion, obviously at $114,000 ask, we can't fully fund it or even come close, but, and their minimum ask of 64 may also still be too high. But generally speaking, we have found that a reduced amount even from that is acceptable. So in the $30,000 range is probably more realistic, but I don't know from your analysis. On the resettlement, with 30,000 meet any? Is that a sufficient amount to meet their goals?
That's a good question. I think that it at least covers some of the stuff that we were talking about where there was no other funding support from other sources. But I think that if you wanted to put that as a placeholder and then have the agency, like as I mentioned, could still respond to that, we could at least take that approach.
You're going to need further clarification from some of these agencies as we try it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So perhaps as we're going through, we could put a minimum ask for Red Cross, bearing in mind that Red Cross has a very large network of funding available beyond the Everett area. So some of the other programs do not have the ability to leverage to the extent that a program like Red Cross. So Red Cross is not going to go under if they don't receive the funds. That doesn't mean their program isn't worthy. I still think for Everett that it's worthwhile, but they certainly have leverage well beyond what we can do. Whereas the and VOA also has a large base as well. So in that sense, some other programs don't have leverage, and so that's also a consideration. But I think as placeholders, it would be nice to pencil some at this point, and then we can revisit it from what we gathered later.
Are we gonna add change amounts here at all now, or are we doing that later?
Yeah, so Chair, as we discussed, I would propose that we, since we do have these broken down by priority, and I think that we can have some good forward momentum with these discussions, I would say that let's go ahead and put in proposed funding recommendations now. We still have the ability after we do the proposals for agencies to still come up and give comment. You still have the ability after that to then revisit your funding recommendations. So you get to touch these multiple times during this agenda. So if we'd like to put in something now, I think that's a good approach.
Okay. So Sue, do you have, you said 30,000 for the VOA program? Do you think that would be?
VOA, I think let's give them their 10 because they, give them their minimum because they said they could.
You mean Red Cross?
I mean
Give them
Red
the 10?
Cross, sorry.
Okay.
And then for VOA, just give them the scarcity of funds.
And
That makes us minus 40,000 to deal with later. We can figure out who we cut as we go through.
are you saying to maintain the other funding recommendations as they're listed?
Oh, okay. Others, I don't want this to be a Sue show, so do others want to take away from anybody above, or do you want to just?
No, I don't. I don't know how everybody else feels about that, but I don't.
So Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
So based on what I'm looking at here, we have, if we want to go by scoring, which I understand is an imperfect measure of, truly human needs here, so I don't want to quantify this too much, but
Yeah.
we are looking at a total of 4 applicants who scored in the 120s. So if we do want to factor in score, I think that may be a valuable place to start. In addition, I would concur with Committee Member Everett, who suggested that perhaps some of the other public services that may not have met a priority be a place we start to look for additional funding. My preferred amount on the VOA ask would be closer to 50,000, but I leave it to committee to discuss.
And we'll go down to the next category and we'll make adjustments and then we'll figure out that last part together. That's my 2 cents about that. I don't want to start jumping down all the way to the bottom before we get to the next section in case we want to adjust there as well. So are we stable here? I know we have to make adjustments to cover that 40,000. But let's maybe go to the next category unless somebody has an opinion or more comments or adjustments.
So I'll wait to see if there's any more committee comments, but at this time, Chair, I would also just make sure that that staff understands that what we are doing is also carrying forward the other staff funding recommendations for the 4 other agencies into
Correct.
the CAC funding. Okay, just to allow me to do that real quick.
Clarification for you.
It's fine.
Chris, the 30,000 is the numbers to get them onto the table, and then maybe you can adjust.
And Chair, I don't want to, and I apologize, I don't want to monopolize, with the hybrid way of doing this meeting. I want to make sure that we're recognized and so the meeting can flow. So I believe my colleague here was discussing the 30,000 for VOA as a jumping off point. I mentioned the $50,000 dollar figure. So just so that we have some sort of place to continue for staff, we want to put that as a point of discussion to the committee.
That's a good question. I don't know if because it's a spreadsheet, I don't know if you can do 30 like in a dash and 50, like if we can have a range.
Split the difference, make it 40. No.
Okay,
I mean,
that seems easier. I like to split the difference.
Or I do think, again, like going through everything, getting down to
Yeah.
the bottom and then
Yeah.
coming back. Maybe we can just mark them as things we want to come back to and reevaluate once we've
That's
done
sort of
everything
what I was
else.
thinking, but which is why I wanted to go through it all.
Chair, this is Michelle, and
Hi, Michelle.
I'm wondering if we, kind of stop with where we're at, knowing we have to come back to these and hear from both agencies as to how they are going to manage with reduced funding or their comments about what's going to work.
We're
So-
gonna do that after, that comes after, Michelle.
Yeah, but I
Not
didn't
at this-
want to fine tune the amounts until we'd heard from the agencies.
Right, but we
Yeah.
will do that. We will do that.
We give preliminary estimates and then we go back and fine tune it after they give us clarification.
Right. But thank you for thinking of them. So we're really clear that the VOA, we're sort of between 30 and 50, and we will fine tune that. I'm making a note so I don't forget. Not that I think anybody will let me, so. I would like us to move to the next category to see what adjustments we need to make. Molly?
Yeah, so I would have two recommendations to increase to the full request. So one of them is for the Bridgeways program. This seemed to me like an absolute winner of an application in terms of preventing recidivism and people who are very highly likely to fall into homelessness. And who need the behavioral health and substance abuse program. So given their above average score and the strong application, I would definitely propose to get them closer to their full ask. Similarly, YWCA with such a high score and a very application very much aligned with priorities, I would recommend getting them back up to their full ask as well. And then again, same point as previously, once we get back down to the third category, I'm happy to recommend some suggested cuts to make up for that.
I want us to remember that with the YWCA that we aren't clear if it's just funding for Everett residents or if it's open to county residents. And I think that we might want to keep that as a consideration.
It's a deal maker. Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay,
Chair, I'd like
so
to support.
go ahead.
I would like to support Committee Member Everett Hart's request for full funding for the Bridgeways, the MAP work program as well.
So you want us to adjust to 73,360. Okay. Any others? And so Molly, you want the YWCA, you wanted to give them their 39,000?
Yeah, but I do think you make a good point that we should confirm that that's going to be for Everett residents.
Okay.
Just bear in mind, committee, we have to take away from somewhere. You know, if we bump everybody up, then we have to reduce somewhere, because now we're at -63. Just saying.
Right. Is there any other adjustments in this category that a committee member would like to see?
Chair, I will say that if we are talking about, trying to find where we would pull from, again, I know we're gonna look holistically, but on this sheet, number 5 on the list here scored in the 120s and received 15,000. That was the Everett Recovery Cafe. I know it's a great organization, but if we are looking at scores, that may be where we would pull from.
I don't feel good about that. They do incredible work and we have such an addictive problem in our community that I wouldn't want to take away their money. And I'm not sure why they didn't score higher. Maybe that's something we should look at, but yeah. If anybody else has an opinion about that, please feel free to share it. I'm going to make an, yes, go ahead.
How did they utilize their 12,000 last year? Did they fully expend it?
Yes, they fully expended it prior to the deadline because they have until December 31st, but they've already spent out the funds. That money went specifically for food costs to support their program. This funding is geared more towards helping the staff that support the programs that they offer.
And devil's advocate, while I do think the Bridgeways program is a valuable asset. 60,000 would be above their minimum ask. I mean, if we can figure out who else to cut, I can support the notion of giving them their full ask, but a proportionate ask would still be more than their bottom line. So I'm reasonably comfortable with maintaining status quo, but, you know, if we can figure, you know, again, show me the money, where can we cut, how we could, you know, so.
So at this point, how much money do we need to come up with that's different than what,
63.
63,000? Molly?
Okay, I know I've just been saying who should get more money, and so now I need to actually say where we're gonna make it back. So looking at the third category, the Hot Meals Coalition has $100,000. That's almost 20% of the overall human needs funding for something that is not a priority. I'm sure we can all agree it's a very important service, but I think we could cut it by 63,000, for example, and it could still provide important meals, but not as many. So that's one suggestion, is either to make up the whole difference there, or to take a big chunk of it from there and whittle away at some of the others one by one. I will also say, you know, Cocoon House shows up in 2 of the other applications above that we are proposing full funding for, both with the Compass Health Partnership and then also with the Journeys program, which was, I think, a really clear, strong application and perfectly aligned. So my proposal would be to try to make up most of that difference by reducing the Hot Meals Coalition
Can you
funding.
clarify because although it's saying Cocoon House, go over a little more, please, that they are the umbrella for the Hot Meals Coalition, because I'm not sure that's clear to everyone.
Yeah, so point from staff for clarification on those. Good discussion, by the way, from all committee members. Really like seeing this dynamic discussion between everyone. So when we see, for example, Cocoon being presented on multiple applications, the interesting thing about that is that just like how Child Strive is listed for Madres, Cocoon is listed for Hot Meal Coalition. They are both agencies in those instances are acting as fiscal agents for these community partners that do not have their own 501c3 status. So they may not be able to facilitate all the grant requirements for internal financial control independently. So they have to have a fiscal sponsor step in to help to facilitate that. So when we see that Child Strive is asking for Madres and Cocoon is asking for Hot Meals, it's actually not those agencies supporting those programs. They are just acting as basically the accounting department for those programs to be able to utilize public funds. And then there was one other point. Oh, the Compass Health one. Compass Health, the partnership is actually Compass Health staff going to Cocoon House. So it's still supporting Compass Health staff. It's just that they happen to do the service provision, the service delivery at Cocoon House. So again, it's not Cocoon's financial benefit on that one. It is the parent organization of Compass Health for that particular proposal.
And you didn't choose to break down all of the programs, but on this one, on the Hot Meals Coalition, perhaps you might want to refresh us, because I'm surprised they're not meeting the criteria.
Well, it's so the Hot Meal Coalition was one that, again, that's one of those that's been looked at to help to support. I think we had it on their Safe Streets efforts in the past, or similar homelessness response efforts. The committee, just years ago, used to take an approach with this proposal where we actually had, the coalition is a group of multiple agencies, a lot of church, faith-based organizations that come in and provide hot meals for the chronic homeless, or those that are basically food insecure throughout the city. No questions asked. Basically, if you need food, you can show up and get a meal. It happens in various locations throughout the city. The committee used to give a peanut butter approach for these programs, where everybody used to come and apply for human needs, and we give 3,000 here and 5,000 there and 8,000 there. And so there has been ongoing support for that program and that delivery of hot meals to those in need in Everett for years. It's just in the last few years that they really kind of pulled everything together under this coalition umbrella to get everybody more streamlined and best practices to be able to do resource sharing. And we have somebody from the agency that can help to support further information as needed. But we did see that last year separated into a $50,000 request with Faith Food Bank stepped in as the fiscal sponsor to facilitate that for the coalition at the time. And then for the coordinator that helps to actually facilitate the coalition's work, that was under a separate request that was still sponsored by Cocoon House at that time. So now what we did is we took the $50,000 for food costs and just brought that into the same proposal for the coalition under Cocoon House now, as it's presented for this funding round. As we're also discussing just all this, the other thing that I'm going to throw out there that ends up being a nice consideration for this whole discussion is that we do have the ARPA dollars. The fun thing about the ARPA dollars that is not so fun necessarily for the agencies is that they're federal dollars. So you do have to comply with Title II OMB internal control standards. The nice thing about human needs funds is that not every they're more flexible and forgiving in the utilization than federal funds are. And so therefore we have a lot of agencies that cannot accept federal funds and that can only accept this funding source for their programs. So as we're looking at how to also divvy out funds, that's not necessarily that the committee needs to really navigate, but I do want it to be considered that this fund opportunity does allow for more grassroots efforts to be able to receive funding that otherwise may not be able to receive public funds through federal or state means. And so when we look at this 100,000 that's available for ARPA, we just need to understand that staff will have to go back and really touch base with some of these agencies to see their capacity for accepting federal dollars and being able to actually utilize those funds as available. So I'm just adding that as part of the discussion too, but hopefully that clarified some points for Committee Member Johnson.
That helps, and just an addendum to that, because I hesitate to dole out 100K at one wash, given the amount of funds we have available. On the other hand, I think that feeding homeless population does address a need, because if we're dealing with housing homeless, it doesn't do any good to house them if they are starving. So there is to me, there's a disconnect there that you can't just do one thing and then ignore the other half of the equation. You have to have, I mean, you might feed them, get them stable, and then you find them a house, and there's sort of a criteria. So I would be hesitant to take 60K off the table for that, but I could see reducing it somewhat, given the large amount proportionate to the others. But I would not necessarily agree that we should use that as a whole ask, even though it's got a big 5 money there.
Real quick, so just to circle back for us to continue with the momentum that we've had, Chair, would you mind if we just kind of firm up this priority section, at least for what proposed recommendations would be, and then we can get into some of these discussion points that we've been just touching on now for the next section?
Yes.
Okay. So I heard that there might be a consideration for some of these allocations as they are listed. Does that work with everyone? Did staff miss a consideration?
I don't think so.
So what we said was Bridgeways. I heard people recommending that going up to full ask.
Yeah, it's there for Bridgeways on top.
And then the why you had, we had bumped that up pending other outcomes, is that correct?
Yes.
And for staff clarification then, unless I hear otherwise, I'm just going to fill in the rest of these for us to just
Okay.
have.
is that roughly? Or 63 over.
You need to do the.
Oh,
But you're looking at the wrong thing. I'm not looking at that.
Yeah.
okay, so we had a committee member that would like to know what the difference is that we're currently dealing with. We have 166 remaining. This is
Oh,
not
because
gonna
we
work out
haven't
the way I
filled in
want
the
it to.
last color.
Yeah, we haven't filled in the last column yet, so let's continue to work through, so I don't have to quick think on my feet.
Okay. So now we're down to the third category, and we've had some comments about these amounts, and so it's open for our discussion at this point.
Chair?
Yes.
Member Dingle, I would recommend, based on, staff, if you would please remind us, on kind of the thinking with number 6, the Millennium Ministries. So their reduced request was 75,000. They're funded at 25,000, and based on what I see, they had the lowest score, second lowest score. So if we're looking for funds, that's 25,000 that I could see allocated somewhere else, but I know there's extenuating circumstances. So.
The only staff clarification point that we have for that is that when looking at the proposal and the delivery of service was meeting a high group or a high need group. And Vicki may have to help me on some of the background for the proposal for that one. And so when we looked at with their ask, we saw that that was a substantial ask, yes. And we looked at what in the budget could still be supported with still the delivery of service with it. And so in looking at the budget that was proposed, 25,000 was nowhere close to even their reduced request. But this is again a organization that has not necessarily received funding in the past from us, but works with a group that we'd like to see supported. And so we looked at providing the coverage of one of their budget categories, which was the consultants budget line item. I think came around to like 22,000, somewhere around in there.
Can you remind us which their proposal was?
Well, they included a lot of things in their proposal, but some of it was like life skills training, program educators, the counseling, rent, food, assistance. They do focus on the immigrant community and those in poverty, and then also Black, Indigenous, and persons of color. So, and their overall grant is the moving from surviving to thriving. So.
Okay.
They do a lot in the community in a lot of different ways, in supporting those who are homeless and food insecure and many things.
So I'm hearing you saying that the recommendation of the reduced ask would be for a targeted amount of what they.
Right.
One of their budget categories, yes. We would restrict the funding and yeah, we would have to hear from the agency to even see if they could even accept that because it was less than the reduced request and it's restricted in what it would be funding.
And as I recall in going through that the fact that it had a target population that isn't addressed in other ones, that's why I was disposed to still giving them that. So due respect, I would definitely disagree with you on that one, that I want to take away the portion for that group.
Chair, just one more follow-up question for staff. The line item was for consultant.
Correct, yeah.
Is that broken down any further into kind of the type of services the consultant provides?
Yes, I believe it was off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
yes,
That's going to be a little hard for me to be able to do. But if we end up having, and I'm not quite sure if we do have anybody from the agency, then they can come up and address that also at this time. So good question, but if you're
Molly
able to
has-
log in Ample Fund, you can also take a chance to look at it.
Molly has her hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at the application and I think that, one of the things they say is that this grant would enable them to kind of move from 1 semester a year to 2 semesters per year. I mean, one thing I'm thinking, I mean, I scored this quite highly. It talks about not just the course, but associated wraparound services for course completers. But one of the things I'm thinking about is if this is a new applicant without a track record yet, and they already have funding for $250,000, and this would help them do additional work. We could wait, see how they do this year, gather some evidence, show traction, see how they do, and then encourage them to apply again next year when they've got a bit more of a track record. It's not like they won't be able to do anything or do this project at all without our $25,000.
So are we recommending pulling our funding source for this round?
I do have a little more information on the budget for the consultants contracts. They mention a budgeting 101 class, a finance and credit course, wellness life coach, home ownership preparation, and an entrepreneurship course.
Okay, does that change anybody's thinking about that?
Johnson? As a former teacher, while I am certainly very pro educating people to move forward, on the other hand, I almost kind of reversed my previous comments in that I don't want to take food out of people's mouths. If there's 1 semester available, then we're not cutting a program, we're still offering services. Whereas if we don't give them food, they're not getting food. So I'm more inclined to support the other person's wait and see attitude than I was. Just ironic, getting rid of a teacher.
Some of the other budget is for their staff that does do more of the direct service work and case management and food support and housing advocacy and things like that. So.
So Chair, at this time, it sounds like there's a second for the proposal of removing that allocation.
I hear that as well.
So in that case, then I will move forward and put that there. Are there any, here's a good question. Are there any ones that we kind of feel okay with that we want to at least stick with and put up and then revisit other ones? Or would you guys still like to just move through these individually?
Chair, do you want to go through them and just say if there's any names?
You mean, I don't understand what you mean, go through them.
Say, do you want to keep are we in favor of, at least preliminarily, the city's recommendation and then give a chance for people to say no? And that way we can assume.
Okay,
Case,
yeah, we can do that.
Because we want to be sure that the members who aren't as vocal are doing the research.
Right. Okay, so at this point, removing the $25,000 from Millennia Ministries, are there any nays, or does anybody else want to make any changes?
This is Michelle, and
Hi, Michelle.
I'm not ready to take away funding from Millennia Ministries. I think that given who their target population is that they're helping, that it would seem that would be something that we would want to support. And so I don't know, when we go through a process of hearing from the agency as to how, if they're there tonight, to how they would address the change, but I wasn't quite ready to take away the 25,000 from them.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, I mean, I think the value of their application is in the full package that they provide. That's what I think makes it so compelling. If we take away all the wraparound and just fund this one piece of it, I think we've taken away its value. So I totally agree with Michelle, that we should try to hear from them and see what they would suggest they can do with a reduced ask that might still manifest in that wraparound approach that seems so promising.
So then I'm wondering if we are at a point where we want to do the next piece, which is public hearing. Is that right?
You kind of get a number that, you know, we haven't balanced ourselves yet. We're still on the.
I know, but it doesn't look
We
like,
just sort of still consider what we want to take away. We talked about the Meals Coalition, but did we get consensus on whether we wanted to reduce that or not?
yeah, we've sort of not even touched it, and that was something that was a consideration a few minutes ago.
For
Yes.
sake of expediting, I'll make a motion to formally reduce that ask by 10,000 down to 90,000. It's an increase over their 2022 award, but does slightly go below their reduced ask.
Okay, thank you.
I would actually say let's bring it down to 80 because we have, they got 82 last year. So if we made it, if we made it 83,000, you know, so that we still are giving a high percentage of money to them, but it leverages some funds that are badly needed in other programs.
Well, could we bump it to 85 just because the price of food is so expensive right now?
I'll support that.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you.
Fine with that. What about the others? No. And does that, and I'm sorry, did we agree to keep millennial at 25 for now?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Thank you for that point of clarification.
Well, until we hear from the agencies and we know
So
what.
Just, and so where does that put us in our plus and minus?
Well, we need to have the other cells filled in, so, if there are any ones that maybe we haven't discussed yet, just to see if the committee's okay with carrying forward the staff funding recommendation.
Right, so
to
is
do
the
that.
committee okay with these staffing Molly?
I'm just looking at the fact that for the Arc of Snohomish County Independent Living Systems Navigation, we're not meeting their reduced ask. So, you know, at what point, don't we ask for the reduced ask so that we can either meet it or say nothing? And so I think we should consider whether we either meet that or we take it off the table if it's not meeting a priority. That's the only one that, you know, doesn't quite fit of this group in terms of alignment with either its max request or somewhere above its minimum request.
We have a point of clarification for the recommendation that we had for that one, just to that committee comment real quick.
Okay,
So they currently have a human needs award and they're not at 35,000. They're not, it does not look like they're going to spend $10,000 in the next, you know, whatever, 20 days or, you know, like they're not going to utilize their full award. That's why the recommendation is 25,000 for them.
It would be an unusual year if we were not to fund it is a unique community that we do not serve another race. And so I would not support taking all of their money away, but seeing that they don't need the full ask, we're not married to their bottom line. Rarely do groups refuse the amount that we're willing to give them if the amount is reasonably substantial. So I personally would prefer to just leave it at 25K. Others?
So Chair, if it's okay with you, I'll go ahead and
move the
move
amounts
that
over.
forward with 25.
Yes, please.
Okay, and then we can move down to the next program, the Helping Hands.
Okay,
Chair, if I may, committee
sure.
member. In looking at this, it's one of the lower scores. We have a budget to balance, so I'm proposing that we would we reduce funding to zero for that program.
Just based on their scoring?
I
Or-
mean, at some point, we got to make a decision at some point on some of these, and every single one of them has a worthwhile. I don't think there's any application that didn't touch on an important population, important work done in the community.
Right.
But we score for a reason, so I'm basing it purely off that. I don't want to make any judgment about the work they're doing or any other organization.
Okay. Does anybody else have an opinion or a comment about that?
129 doesn't seem like a dramatically low score to me, but
I mean, I do appreciate the effort to sort of just decide some things based quantitatively because they're all going to be really hard decisions, but maybe a different approach with that same principle in mind would be to look at all of the programs that are in the 120s and cut $5,000 off of each of them, for example, and see where that gets us with our overall score. That wouldn't eliminate anyone, but would, and with several of them, they'd still be above their minimum. They're at their minimum ask.
I like that approach. So let's see what that looks like. Let's reduce the Hope Alive to 15. And then, yes, thank you so much.
so then would we be reducing Carl Gibson to 20 then? And, oh wait, they're not in the 20s.
So, Chair, point of clarification, that would mean we would also be reducing the Housing Hope Teen and Young Parent from 15 to 10 on our first spreadsheet. And we would be reducing Everett Recovery Cafe, Peer Support Recovery from 15 to 10 on
Okay.
second spreadsheet.
Let's see what that looks like. Does anybody have an opposition to that idea?
Sure, the only staff has brought up multiple times, trying to move away from a peanut butter approach.
I know.
I don't want to get too into the food metaphors around this time for everyone, but I think that is a consideration in that reducing asks by 5,000 at a time may not get us there. That isn't to say this isn't a bad idea. I think it's actually a very worthwhile idea when we just need to get closer, but we may need to look at larger amounts.
Okay. That's why we're playing with numbers right now.
Chair, would you like for me to move forward with the proposed reduction?
Yes, please.
And that was. And so now we're back to homage.
Okay. And so is there any comment or adjustment to be made here?
How much so we gave the Neos Coalition 85. So they're also a Neos service, so they're meeting a unique need, but we could reduce, well, they scored much higher, so.
I would recommend, Chair, again, I apologize. I would recommend keeping that funding ask at the current recommended level from staff, based on the fact that not only does the Carl Gibson Center offer a place here specifically for this dining program, but it also has a lot of overlap with the veteran community based on demographics. So I see some potential overlap there in one of our targeted communities, which I don't believe there were many or any programs that sought to directly fund any veteran communities. So
Not to mention seniors.
seniors as well.
So
Truly. Sue?
I concur with you on that.
Oh, okay. I couldn't hear you.
Sorry.
I'm guessing we're gonna put $25,000 in our blue category then. We're down to child and family specialist.
somebody had the applications handy, what percentage of their total budget would, Housing Hope has a pretty, don't they have a pretty large budget? Would 10,000 make or break them in terms of, if we didn't fund that, isn't their budget well over the number?
That's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know if we have anybody from Housing Hope with us
Somebody
tonight,
had
but they,
applications on the computer, so was that you, Michelle?
It's hard to get those exact numbers quickly, but I can try.
to that extent, I will say, and this goes for, I think, any organization that's on this list, but of course, I know that at least I remember hearing from this specific agency that even the nominal amounts of our floor, which is 10,000, that's not to sneeze at $10,000. But that a lot of agencies will use even just the $10,000 floor for leveraging for other asks, because it shows, you know, community support, and so it ends up being leveraged against other funders. But that's the only thing I can remember about their budget at this time. I remember Johnson.
The funds are to sustain some of their current, or help sustain some of their current staff positions, like the child and family specialist, the child and family specialist manager, and then their director of social services that oversees their program.
Well, again, that's preserving youth from, it goes hand in hand with domestic violence prevention. So while they have a big budget, it would seem like 10,000 we could cut somewhere else. Given that it's, again, I think we still list the, not even elsewhere.
Are we researching this, or are we just doing something else with it?
It doesn't sound like anybody's available to research it at the moment, so I would ask if anybody has any guidance on just adopting the recommendation or.
I will, yes, let's do that.
I recommend keeping the staff funding level. It is a high scoring applicant, and it is already on our floor.
Okay. And now we're down to Snohomish County Legal Services.
Well, I would assume we all agree not to fund the biking program.
Yes, we did.
This is Michelle. I think for the last two that we use the staff recommendations and then come back to it all once we've heard from the agencies.
Okay,
I'll second that.
thank you.
I would second using their recommendations, but I would prefer that we get a rough idea where we want to cut so that we were starting out balanced and never going up and down. If we start out of balance before we hear from the people, it makes our work a little harder.
Well, how, if we,
Plug
if
in
we,
and then see where we're at.
Yeah, plug it in and then see where we're at.
right, that's what I want to do. I want to move them, yeah. And now where are we?
So that puts us $28,260 over.
Okay,
So again, that number is 28,260.
okay.
Chair, if we're
Yes.
still, if we want to revisit based on those numbers, or would you like to, I apologize, I didn't mean to.
Go for it.
My thought is, if we want to go back now and revisit, if we're 23,000, that's much closer than I thought we would be, so that's great.
28,000, but yeah,
28,000, potato, potato. So I'm wondering if we want to relook, we reduced the funding asks, as I understand it, by 5,000 for each applicant that scored in the 120s, except for, I'm sorry, I'm not wearing my glasses. So the Millennial Ministries, did they stay at 25 or did they go to 20?
They went to 20.
Okay, I am misunderstood. I apologize. Please forgive me.
So process already. Well, the
So Chair, would you like for me to scroll up to the top just for
Yes,
online?
please, just so we
Okay.
can see it all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, Journeys, we're giving them 44,000. Their floor was 22. And last year we gave them 40, so we could probably maintain 40 and they would still have a substantial more. That would be 4,000. We could even maintain the similar funding, but we're still well above their floor.
I'm hesitant to pull from our number one
I agree.
applicant, who's in
I
a
agree.
need for housing.
A huge priority. Yeah. And it's only 4,000, so.
So with that in mind, then probably our first page is not a likely page for us to take money from.
Chair, would you concur that it's okay to scroll down to the next priority maybe?
Yes, please. Thank you. I really don't know where we're getting $28,000.
What's that?
I mean, I'll go back to the fact that between the two meals thing, the two meals programs in the third category, I don't have the updated anymore, but it's over $100,000. Do we think that 20% of our overall funding to meals is the right proportion? It still seems to me like an area that we could cut from without substantively hurting any of the programs, including those that we would cut a bit.
So could we scroll down to the third category, please, so I can see?
Yeah, just one quick point. We want to make sure,
Oh, everything's lined up.
yeah, that everything is truly where it needs to be for that. But you can continue. Yeah.
Thank you. So, then you're, Molly, saying could the Everett Hot Meals Coalition and the Carl Gibson?
Yeah.
Okay, so how would you adjust that? How do you see that?
So we have 28 to cut. We could cut it to, 65. And you're making me do live math now. 65
I am, I'm
and
sorry.
20 or some 18 or something like that. I think it's just a matter of proportions and getting to our final number. But I feel like having such a big ask and such a high reduced request from the Hot Meals Coalition is kind of making us give a lot more than we're giving to anyone else. It doesn't quite seem in balance when you see such a high award to one.
I think some of the rationale for that was the ARPA funds, and who could spend them, as Kembra explained to us. So I think that was the rationale at one point, but I hear that we're moving beyond that at this point, so.
Yes.
Yeah,
I-
I mean, yeah.
I can support Molly's proposal is that, between the two of them, make the reductions down to 65,000 and 20,000. And I don't know what that,
Well, can we adjust and then see, please?
yeah. And then it might go back up to, the Everett Court map one was the only one at the full, really the only one at the full ask, and take the remainder from it, the 3,000 something.
3,260.
Yeah.
3,260 and even that up, it'd still be, substantially close to what the original ask was.
And I'm sorry, who did
So
you
you're
say?
suggesting we go all the way to the first priority?
We removed it from the.
Yeah, and just,
and the Carl Gibson Center.
Right, but then she was, and I'm sorry, I was trying to follow you. Where did you suggest?
Go all the way back up to the Everett one, the
To the first, right.
3,360, and take the 3,000.
Oh, so give them 70,000.
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm still not getting from you where you want to take. When you say the first one, on which page?
So right there.
It's the bridgeways, the very
The
first
bridgeway.
one.
Oh, bridgeways.
Or on the second page, I guess.
Oh,
First on the
okay.
second page.
Oh,
So if you took it from the bridgeways and evened it up to the 70,000, it's really close to their original ask. It's still in the high priority, and we're spending still what it is, almost 90,000 or so on food between the two.
Okay, so you're suggesting giving them 70,000?
Yes.
70,100 because we are now flush at zero.
Right.
So they,
So it just trims it just a little bit, but it balances out the rest of the ask.
yeah, yep.
I would support that. Yeah, I mean, if we're at zero right now, I'm supportive of.
It's kind of an initial place for us to start, and
Exactly.
you know,
Okay,
and
then
come back to
page,
it.
Lisa, and then everything. But yeah.
Fantastic.
So-
So at this point, do we feel comfortable closing the committee discussion until we hear from the agencies? And then we'll revisit.
I would second that, Chair.
Thank you. So I actually need you, Chris, to make the
I
motion
would
and
be
then
happy to
some.
do that, Chair. I motion that we move on to the next section of our agenda.
Seconded.
Thank you. Okay, so we are now opening the discussion for anybody in the public or the agencies to come. So if you're on the line virtually, please raise your hand button. And if you're in the room, you can raise your hand and come to the podium.
And just like last time, the people who made the effort to come here in person, I would suggest that we allow them to have a chance to address us first, since they came down here, and then we deal with the people online.
Okay, is there anybody in person that would like to come to the podium and speak?
We do. We have one person that's raised their hand currently. And to
Okay.
that point, you can go ahead and go on up. I'm going to actually have you just make sure, we need to make sure it's live still. Can you just say something real quick? Did everybody hear that? Okay, so can you go flip it up?
Is there a time limit for their discussion? So reminding participants to keep it to 3 minutes, was it?
Yes, yes. So it's keeping it to, so comments are limited to 3 minutes. Please state your name for the record and the agency that you're here to represent, and then you may provide your comment.
My name is Galina Volchkova. I'm a senior director with Volunteers of America Housing Services. Can you hear me? Okay. So I'm here to support a request for the Human Needs to serve Ukrainian refugees. We do have 400 households enrolled, 421 now enrolled in our refugee program, which is over 1,300 individuals. The main request that we have, the logic behind 114,000 that we requested, was for one full-time case manager and flex funds to help with moving costs, which is deposit, application fee, first month's rent. Without moving costs, there's not much we can do to have meaningful service. At the same time, if we have only 3 case managers currently, everyone has over 100 cases on their caseload, and we think about serving super vulnerable households. Definitely, I understand the shortage in funds and all the cuts with all the amazing services that we're discussing here, what I'm hearing, those are really meaningful services. But what I'm thinking about, if we have only 30 to 50,000 on this request, we definitely won't be able to fund a full-time case manager. We would then put our funds towards moving costs, 100%. What that means, with 50,000, we can serve with moving costs about 15 households. it may be not a big, huge number, but that's 15 families, most of them with children, Everett residents. Like this one that we just put in the housing, the hosting family, the sponsor couldn't handle 5-year-old, the mom with the 5-year-old. It was causing a lot of disturbance and noise. And this family ended up on a transit station. Ukrainian family that already relocated here with a huge trauma. So our service put them in permanent housing within a couple days. They moved in the Capella apartments, but we have a lot of landlords that we're working with Everett, city of Everett area. And due to, we provide also other projects like rental assistance, rapid rehousing. We have a lot of connections with local landlords to make the housing placement for refugees much easier, almost like a miracle with the unit vacancies that pretty low everywhere in Snohomish County. And with the lack of credit history for refugees, we're still able to house them. We house over 200 households within the last 6 months, and refugees keep coming. So each family matters. So if you fund 50,000, I'll be really thankful for those families, for moms with kids, that they can not only get housing placement with us, they enroll kids in school, they enroll in English classes, we help them with employment. We actually serve them at the Carl Gibson Center for, we call it Welcome Center every Friday. And refugees come and we meet with case managers and we serve meals for them and help them with housing search and other resources. 30,000 would serve only 8 families. So if we have 50,000, that's really reduced ask what we have, but we will provide case managers. We'll keep adding people under caseload, but at least we have this moving cost for 15 households in the city of Everett. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to mention our work.
Thank you.
Can we ask them?
Not yet. We're just in public testimony at the moment. So we had a question on whether or not committee members can ask questions at this time. We're just doing public testimony.
No, let's let everybody speak.
Yeah, and then we'll open it up for committee discussion later. So,
Fantastic. Jamie Kuntz has her hand up.
no, afterwards you can, after we close public comment.
Jamie.
Any other hands raised from the
Oh,
room?
sorry.
Yes, we have another participant who would like to come up and give comment. So again, I'm probably going to give you a little tea time when you're at your mark, so.
Sounds good. I'll try to keep this brief. So I'm Brennan Davis. I'm the ED at the Everett Recovery Cafe. And we were so grateful for the funding this last year that helped us feed people coming in our doors. This year, you're able to focus on behavioral health, which is actually what we do. It is a little surprising that the score was a little lower, and what you would give us would be actually less than last year, as food is not necessarily our priority, but we do appreciate, I appreciate your discussion and the lowage of funds. So we're a safe, healing community for those affected by challenges with mental health, homelessness, and addiction to empower long-term transformation through human connection. So when I say transformation, it's maintaining that sobriety, getting your kids back, getting your license back, getting that job, having that dream that maybe you never thought possible because of the addiction that you suffer from. So, and right now I just pulled up the numbers. 98% of the people walking in our doors say that we increased their desire to be in recovery. And then 91% said that we helped prevent alcohol relapse, and 92%, or 93 really, helped prevent drug relapse. And then 90% say that we increased the amount of hope in their lives, which is huge for people in recovery who, have struggled, And as I've heard you mention, it's a huge priority in the city. It's a huge need. And our numbers are just growing. We've been doing some outreach, and in July, it was at 716 members coming in a month, and then 906 member visits the next month, 1,006 the next month, 1,056 the next month. And so as we're having people walk in our doors, our concern is that they would come in and sit down, and it would be like a holding place, which is wonderful. Like, we have heating, we have, place to charge your phone. But our secret sauce is actually community. It's radical hospitality and loving accountability. It's instilling value in someone, showing them that they're valuable, and then having that loving check-in of like, well, how are you doing? Let's move past this. What's that next goal, through our recovery coaches and through our floor staff. And so that's really what we're asking for, because our concern is that with this increased demand of people wanting to get into recovery, that they would come and not be known by anyone. And that's a real struggle because, like I said, community is the goal and also the secret sauce. And it helps people like Bailey, a young woman who is now actually helping people in recovery herself. But when she came in, she was pregnant, in addiction. And it was actually because of her, she loves when I say this, that we invented a lot of our policies for how members should behave, Now she just actually finished getting her business degree from Everett Community College and has custody of her child again. And that's future impact. So thank you so much. I appreciate your hearts. I just got the tea from Kimbra. It was such a good tea. It was very thoughtful. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have another hand raised from the room.
I see that.
Good evening, and thank you for doing this important work. My name is Mario Brown. I'm the Executive Director of the Northwest Washington chapter of the American Red Cross. And I greatly appreciate that you read our application and recognize the work that we do. I wanted to just highlight, most of the time you think large disasters and you think Red Cross, but that's not what we do every single day. Every single day we alleviate human suffering, we prevent human suffering. And I wanted to reassure you that by supporting the work that we do here locally, you are also working with this big conglomeration of people trying to alleviate human suffering. So I greatly appreciate it. I want to thank you for your consideration. I just wanted to highlight one particular thing. What we do in our prevention of human suffering and our elevation of human dignity is make sure no one is left alone on their worst day. For example, Mr. Dingo, you had mentioned the apartment with multiple families in it and some people sleeping on the ground. What happens if that burnt to the ground tonight? People don't think about that. If we are not there on site at 2 a.m. when the fire's happening, no one else is there. And those families then have to now rely on so many other organizations to get them out of homelessness, when what we're trying to do is say, you know what? You're not going to actually slide into homelessness. That's what that $10,000 can help us do. And just so you know, since July 1, there have been 8 multifamily units destroyed in the city of Everett, just since July 1. We've already had 60 families that we've been helping in the city of Everett. Some of those are single family dwellings, but when we start to talk about those on the edge, just remember what's in your primary residence: your medicine, your food, your pets. When all of that is destroyed, you may not have any funds to go replace it. That's what we do. And that's what your $10,000 is going to do. And we greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the room? Okay, Chair, I think that we're ready to address public comments. It looks as though from our perspective in Teams, we actually can also present them in the order in which their hand was raised.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I didn't know that we could do that either. So that's pretty fun to see that. So it looks as though Jamie Kuntz is our first person to be able to come off of mute and give comment.
Thank you for the time to talk about our organization. I'm Jamie Kuntz from the ARC of Snohomish County, and I wanted to address the lowered amount that that was recommended. I know there was some discussion about either going our lower ask or nothing, and we can make use of whatever funding is determined. Of course, we'll make some cuts here and there, but it's really important. Our agency is a nonprofit that serves individuals with developmental disabilities and their families for a lifespan. And we do link to housing. We make sure that when a family or an individual calls us in crisis, we are helping them access applications, access funding, whether it's through us or our community partners. we attend the meetings so that we're able to not only say you can fill out an application at this other agency, but to help understand the process and understand why they're filling out applications and walking alongside them so that they can stay living secure and safe in their community. So we do things. We had someone call recently that just wanted a staff to help them read some paperwork that they had. And so we're able to sit down and just help with that, because so many times people have difficulty understanding the paperwork process. They need case management that we offer to remind them to turn it in, to complete it. Sometimes even just, why don't you come to our office and do it while we're sitting next to you to get that checked off. And we're the only agency that serves individuals for that lifespan and really helps do that case management. So the funding that you've given in the past is so appreciated, and I know that it will go far in the future in supporting individuals with developmental disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Next is going to be Jim Dean.
Hi, I'm Jim Dean. I'm the Executive Director of the Interfaith Family Shelter, and I would like to thank you very much for, first off, making housing and homelessness a priority. I know that's a difficult thing to put ahead of so many other very valuable and very important things there. The thing I want you to note is that the funding that we're requesting this year, though it looks very different than we've done in the past, is for programs that don't exist right now, or one of them exists, but it's a place for more families to get assistance and more families to get shelter. And so I want to thank you for the work you've done there. I know it's hard to get to what number matches up with the bottom line, but in that process, I know that you know you're doing the right thing in the right way. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for much of the work that you do.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, continuing to go down, it looks as though Jack Harris is our next public speaker.
Yes, I want to say thank you so much for your deliberation and your conversation about grant funding for the project of the Everett Hot Meal Coalition. I am the coordinator, director, and planner, and I want to give you just a moment of who we are. We provide 93,000 meals a year to the people in Everett that live on the streets, that live in cars, that are homeless. We are a vital link to their survival. That's actually 1,800 meals a week, and we do that 7 days a week. The cost of food is astronomically rising, and it is just crippling us. There are supply chain issues. It is very real. We buy only in bulk food. We buy from Costco, from US Chef. We seek donations anywhere we can. And I think we provide more than just a meal. We provide a safe environment for people to have respite, to have a shelter, to use a bathroom, to connect to Mercy Watch and other social service programs that come through our roofs and our hot meal programs. I think we will, of course, go with your recommendation, and we will seek as much funding from any other source that we can. And we are extremely grateful for the conversation and any funds that you will extend to us. I think the last thing I would say is that we serve approximately 120, sometimes 150 meals a night, and that number is increasing. So I'm nervous for reduced funding. I fully admit that. It scares me a little bit because the people on the streets that live in cars and under bridges and under a tree and in a tent in Everett, they have to eat. And it's just absolutely critical and vital. And that's what we do. So thank you so much for the discussion and the conversation, and we will happily accept whatever you afford to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to have Arhelia Grassfield.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for considering us for funding. My name is Argelia Grasio. I'm a regional director with the YWCA. And I'm here to answer and respond to the question of how many of the number of clients to be served in this proposal will be residents of the city of Everett. Since we first opened for services in December 2018, Homeward House has served an average of 173 individuals in 68 families each year. They are from all Snohomish County. Parents complete intake assessment at the entry. Part of the demographic information that we collect from participants is the residents, where are they living at the time of entry. Based on that information of those 173 individuals or 68 families, last year, we find out that at least 40 parents and an average of 40 children under the age of 8 years old, mostly infants, involved or at risk of involvement with CPS were from the city of Everett. That's more than 50% of the clients that we served last year were residents of the city of Everett. There are 5 parent allied mentors providing services to the families. 3 are full-time, 2 are part-time. The full-time parent allied mentors can serve 20 families at any point during the year or any point in time. They have a caseload of 20 families. The part-time parent allied mentors serve 10 families at any point in time. It takes about 2 full-time positions to serve the city of Everett residents. Consider the full-time can have 20 families as a caseload. The funding that we are asking in this application is the majority is just to pay a part-time position, which it can only serve 10 families. In addition to that, we have other parent allied mentors that are going to be providing service to the city of Everett residents. They are not what we were proposing on this application. It's additional services. What the parent allies are going to be focusing in providing that peer mentorship, one-on-one support for the parents that are visiting at Homeward House. They can come, cook, use the bathroom to take showers, prepare for the visitation, get diapers, to get wipes, and use the building that we have for them. They can even do laundry while they're visiting with the children. We serve a lot of residents of the city of Everett that are homeless, and they are staying around the city too. So I really thank you so much for this opportunity. And again, $34,450 are gonna go just to pay for the salary and the benefits for this part-time position that is gonna be serving families. The rest, we are coming as a match for your funding to provide the rest of the services to the rest of the families. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, and last we have Jane Pack to provide public comment, virtual public comment. Jane, I see that you are unmuted, but unfortunately we do not hear anything. Jane, it looks like you are remuted. If you can, are you able to use video at all?
She just made a note in the comment that just said, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, I saw that.
Should we have her type in the comment and I can read it?
Yeah, so Jane, if you're unable to join us via audio, then you can go ahead and just provide a quick comment. It looks as though the comment that was provided was, and I quote, "I just wanted to say thank you."
And she's with Snohomish County Legal Services.
That's correct, yes, yes.
Are there any other public comments that would like to happen at this time?
Just for cleaning or point of order. I'm going to lower the hand of Arhelia and Jane at this time. And then if there is if anybody else is looking to provide up, and Jane, raise your hand again. Up there goes. Okay. So now we have no hands raised in the room nor online. I think that staff is checking if we have any written comments to be read into the record.
Okay.
And that gives me time to go check on the lights real quick.
Okay. Okay, so we do have, and let me just get my, oh,
Whoa.
we're still here. We're just, the lights go off automatically at 6 p.m. So we are just getting that adjusted. Okay, so I do, I have a couple committee comments and I have an applicant comment, and then I do have a question clarification to provide. The first one is from Homage, and they did send an email to make sure that the H is pronounced. So and I was practicing this earlier because I know it's pronounced. So Julie and Cheryl and Leah, we have you covered. So the public comment is from Homage Senior Services, and they've collaborated with the City of Everett for many years to assist the senior population and adults living with disabilities to live independently and with dignity in their homes. This partnership not only provides necessary resources to some of our most vulnerable community members, our services and programs help keep these families feeling valued and connected to their communities. Homage programs provide an affordable option for meeting many community needs: a safe and affordable living environment, reliable transportation for access to medical care, increased food security with access to nutritious meals, and an expanded focus on mental health support services. Funding provided by the City of Everett is critical for the successful continuation of one of our most popular programs, the Community Table Congregate Meals at the Carl Gibson Center. This program addresses critical community needs such as food insecurity, health and safety, and social isolation. In addition, we continue to serve an increased number of meals and clients. Community table dining is also essential in assisting our unhoused elders, as they can not only receive a hot meal 5 days a week, they can also connect to additional community resources while on site. Homage is committed to our community, and funding for these services is crucial for our sustainability, especially as the demand for services remain high. Our partnership with City of Everett also allows us to work towards eliminating barriers and provide a wide range of essential services that our community needs. So that is that public comment. I will now, we had a couple of committee comments during the review of the application. So I will read just those comments. The first one is for Reboot Recovery Trauma Healing Program. The comment is that support for Everett veterans struggling with mental health challenges is a worthy and necessary use of 2023 Human Needs funds. The other comment was for the VOA Refugee Resettlement Program. Everett and Snohomish County are a hub for the Ukrainian American community in Washington State. Demographic data from U.S. Census indicates Northwest Washington has one of the largest populations of Ukrainian Americans in the country. Fully funding resettlement support for Ukrainian refugees in our community, where they will have cultural and familial connections, makes sense and is the right thing to do. The other was a question that a committee member had that we were not able to address before noon yesterday. So it has to do, there was a question for with bridgeways, but it also ties into the Everett Municipal Court. So the question was, what percentage of misdemeanor cases handled by the Everett Municipal Court involve a mental health concern? So we did reach out to Everett Municipal Court staff. They did provide, they don't keep, it's not tracked internally at the court. But they did provide a study. It's from 2016 that is has to do with behavioral health needs of jail inmates in Washington State. And it does apply to, they look specifically at those who are on Medicaid who are in jail. And so there is a little difference there, but it does say 6 in 10 had mental health treatment needs. 6 in 10 had substance use disorder treatment needs, and then 4 in 10 had co-occurring disorder indicators. So, and the court also said that they do not feel that Everett is in any less need of services than, you know, inmates in Washington State as a whole. If anything, over the past year, it's probably gotten worse because of a lack of services, because it is so hard to get into mental health treatment voluntarily right now. Many places aren't even putting people on a waiting list. So that was the information that we got on that. Any other questions that the committee had during review? We were able to get answers to them for that. And let me just check my email one more time to see if any additional public comments have come in. And that concludes what I have for public comments and committee comments.
Thank you, Vicki. So if there are no further public comments, we're going to close the public hearing part. I need a motion and a second, please.
We need a motion and a second to close the public hearing.
I motion to close the public comments.
Second.
Thank you. We are now have a closed public hearing. Our next piece of business is to now, I'm going to call roll, and if you have any comments or questions about the public hearing specifically, then there you go, Sue. Now you get to go because you're on top of the list. Sue Johnson.
Okay, and my question was for the representative on the VOA, and you had stressed that an award of 50,000 and then you said what 30,000 is 8. Now, to clarify, because I can't see the little numbers, do we recommend 40?
So point of clarification, we are going back to the Excel spreadsheet. We're not sharing that at that time, so I'm going to read it out loud. It was proposed for the CAC funding recommendation to provide 30,000 for the VOA refugee resettlement program.
I had picked up wrong. So the point of clarification that even at that reduced ask, you would be able to have 8 households that were helped. And so we assume that even though it is below your stated minimum, that would still be happy to receive at least that much.
Yes, families can be settled, start happy life here.
Okay, so thank you. That's all.
Okay, Michelle Martin, do you have any questions or comments about the public hearing part?
I appreciate all the agencies and having them here tonight to share and to answer questions, and I have no further questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Christopher Dingle.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for VOA. The flex funds, I was writing down notes quickly, but that's for those are the moving costs that you talked about. And those, it doesn't go outside of moving costs. It's not for naturalization, work permitting, anything like that. It's strictly for the housing aspect.
If we had more funds, we will definitely expand it to pay for driver's licenses, for some registration fees, but with such an extremely limited dollar amount, we would probably reserve it for moving costs, which is holding fee, application fee, deposit, first and last month's rent, or at least deposit, depending on the requirements of each situation.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
And then Molly.
No further questions from me, thanks.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any questions or comments either. So Now we move to a funding recommendation action. Oh, boy.
But, one point of clarification, it does look like Matt Bissell, committee member Bissell is on the call. I'm not sure.
Okay.
If he's able to speak, but I just wanted to be sure.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I don't have any questions.
Okay. Thank you. I'm glad to know that you're here. So now we need a motion for on funding. Or we're just gonna play with it some more.
Yeah, so Chair, if it's okay with you, staff is going to share the Excel spreadsheet again.
It's always okay with me. Your help is invaluable. I'll just say that out loud.
Okay, so everybody should be seeing the spreadsheet.
Yes. So if we are, where are we, where is the committee with these numbers at this time?
I guess the question would be, after hearing from the committees, is there any number that people want to change?
Right. That too.
Chair, if I may,
Yes.
the funding for VOA, I would like to revisit that and see if we could increase that, if not to minimum, at least to the $50,000 mark, to support 15 families. Because, and I will also add that, to my understanding, staff's concerns surrounding the funding use for moving costs, those seem like the exact kind of funding priorities you need for almost any type of housing situation. So, you know, to me, it seems like those meet the standards we have for the housing needs priority. If, I mean, was there anything else within?
For any support for placement, housing placement, you know, first deposit, you know, rent, anything like that usually does get qualified as a housing priority activity. So if we were looking at supporting the moving costs or the other flexible housing costs for this program, that would fit the housing priority under this funding round. So
Don't support that, where would you take the 25?
Right.
Sure. So in looking at this, there were 3 items that I highlighted as being potential sources. I'm very much in support of the Bridgeways program. As listed, we bumped it from the 60,000 recommendation up to 70, I believe. So perhaps meeting in the middle there. Then I have on the last sheet 2 programs, the Helping Hands program and Millennia Ministries, I apologize. Both are scored in the 120s. The Millennium Ministries is now at 20,000, which is significantly under the reduced ask. The staff clarifications about the purpose of putting them at the initial $25,000 mark makes sense. Perhaps this is a space, I believe, as Chair Everett said, where we look to see what they accomplish this year, or we provide them with maybe the $10,000 mark so that they can leverage that for additional funds. So those would be the 3 places that come to mind.
Does anybody else have any opinion or support or not support for this idea?
Given that the staff recommended the Bridgeways at 60,000, I could support any number that was 60,000 or thereabouts, because that would, if we funded them at 60 as the staff recommended, and then perhaps rather than go the full 50 that he wants, we could go, we recommended 30, we could go 40. I think 50 might be pushing it a little. I hate to take away from the programs where where their ask is small and where our funds really leverage them strongly. So if we have to take away, 10,000 at a time.
So I guess based off of that suggestion, if there were to get to 50, as I suggested, if we went 5 from Bridgeways, 5 from Helping Hands, and 10 from Millennium Ministries, would leave all with funding, but would move VOA to 50.
I could support that.
So you're saying then Bridgeways would then be at 65?
Bridgeways would be at 65, Millennium Ministries would be at 10, and Helping Hands would be at 10.
Is the committee okay with me putting in these proposed amounts, see where that
Yes,
puts us? Okay.
I am. I'm not the whole committee, but
Any opposition to me moving forward with the recommendations? Okay. To that point, I also just want to mention that I don't think that we heard from either one of these agencies tonight, either Helping Hands or Millennia. And so another thing to consider is, and just to make sure real quick, I'm going to interrupt myself. You said 65?
yes.
Okay. Technically we have 65, 100.
100, right.
Extra 100 right there. So we did not hear from either of the other two agencies that were mentioned down here that we did reduce, Helping Hands or Millennia. To that extent, one thing that we just have to be mindful of is that in case staff does go to this agency and say, can you accept $10,000? And they say, no, for whatever reason, identifying maybe a contingency may not be a bad idea, to just try and identify that should that 10,000 or even 20,000 become available, that could go to an already identified program that's on the list. Just something to think about. I mean, I know that our priority is still to allow them to leverage. It's just, should that come up, should anybody withdraw an application?
What did our number come to?
Yes, good question. So to
But I
circle
don't think
back.
we changed, I don't think you changed VOA.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So to circle back on that one then, let's see where we land.
Oh, yeah, where do we land and then how much do we have to give them?
We're flush at 0. So we balanced out
And what did we give the other?
50.
Oh, we did give.
This is Michelle. I would propose that once you circle back with those agencies, and if one of them couldn't, that we would take that funding and put it back into the hot meal program to get it closer to what was funded last year, knowing how great the need is.
There's 2 hot meals programs. So
Yeah, the Cocoon House.
The Hot Meals Coalition.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Did our latest, so we took 5 away from Carl Gibson.
Carl Gibson sits at 20,000 even.
Would people objecting to topping them off and then the rest to the coalitions? They both are worthy, or do you want?
No, I'm not opposed to that.
Is it?
I don't know, but my understanding is that they serve a pretty specific population at the Carl Gibson Center. So I'm reticent to cut it entirely. And if the overall point is to get more meals for more tables for a more diverse group, then spreading it around multiple organizations seems like a good idea to me.
And I think we're talking about the contingency.
Yeah.
Right.
So what I'm suggesting is with the contingency, give the first 5 to Carl Gibson and anything above that to the Hot Meals Coalition.
Okay. Michelle, how do you feel about that?
I think that works for me. Yeah.
Okay,
So,
okay.
so can that be?
So this is going to be a contingency up to 25,000 and then contingency contingency for any remainder funds going to Hot Meal Coalition.
Okay.
Because sometimes other agencies, we've often had contingencies in the past.
We typically do contingencies for our federal and our state funds. We haven't always done that for human needs just because it's so competitive. So we find money to go somewhere. But in this case, again, without agency representation, it's hard to understand whether or not the 10,000 that's being awarded to these two agencies will be something that they can utilize or not. So I think having a contingency is a good idea in this case.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kembra, for doing that. At this point, if there's no other movement of funding, I would ask for a motion on these recommendations as listed and a second.
Chair, I motion to accept these recommendations from the board as written and close discussion.
I second, and I recommend that you take a voice count to make sure that everyone has.
I will do that. Thank you. So now, since we have a motion and a second, I will call roll and each member will please say yes or no, that they accept the recommendation as listed. Sue Johnson.
Approve.
Matt Bissell.
Yes, I accept.
Thank you. Michelle Martin.
Yes.
Christopher Dingle.
Yes.
Molly Eberhardt.
Yes.
And I, Susan Mosshart, say aye, yes as well. Thank you so much. Now it's time for me to turn this back over to Kembra for staff updates.
Whew.
I know.
Felt like they worked tonight. Okay. So the good news is if anybody would like to leave at this time, you're more than welcome to. If you want to hang around for a few minutes of staff discussion, you can also do that as well. Completely up to you. That's also for our virtual participants as well. So at this point, as I mentioned earlier, human needs do not go through a formal public comment period. The human needs funds are given in a resolution for recommended action to City Council. Right now, we are proposing that to be in mid to late January. Of course, the human needs funding calendar year or funding year is based on a calendar year, and so funds can be used back to January 1st. And so the whole intent with getting the action moving forward with council is to try and get agreements out timely so that people can start spending the money. So that's going to be the next effort from staff for these recommendations. To that extent, it's going to be a minute until the committee meets again. And I say that because, of course, you know, we do have the holiday season coming up and people are going to be out of the office and taking vacations. Hopefully, everybody's going to have a very joyful time. Hopefully, you're able to continue your element of service that you all do so wonderfully in this capacity and able to convey service elsewhere as well. But to that extent, when we do meet again, one of the things that we're going to be looking at is establishing a new chair for the next program year. And then we will also be looking to welcome new committee members again at that time. We had some committee member terms that ended. We also had a few committee members that had to step away due to other scheduling conflicts. And so we will be looking to welcoming a new group in the new year and looking to establish a new chair at that time as well. Additional updates from staff are that, of course, we still have our public federal and state dollars that will be moving forward. Those will go to City Council at a later time after Human Needs. Of course, Human Needs has priority because of the urgency of getting the funding cycle started as soon as possible. But our federal and our state application or a proposal will go to City Council sometime in February. And then, of course, the annual action plan will be submitted to HUD in May. Following that, what we are looking to do for the federal and the state program funds is that this next year, we're going to start again doing what was a heavy effort in the past. If you were a long-standing committee member, then you will remember that in the past, we've had to go through our consolidated plan effort, which is extensive in its public engagement. It also incorporates our analysis of impediments to fair housing report. And so we will be looking at establishing again all of the efforts to revisit what our 5-year goals are going to be for identifying community needs, how we want to support those efforts in our allocations for federal funds. So that will be something that's coming up next year, as well as again looking to revisit human needs funds all over again for 2024 once we go through that. Separate from that, we still have Ample Fund that is moving forward. The great news about that is that that's actually at a point of wrap up for the Community Development Division. And we will be looking to allow for other departments to start using the platform. The real exciting thing with that is that it's the first time that the city's been able to really convey in an open data portal, open data sourcing portal that's available where anybody can come in, not only from the city of Everett as a resident, but anybody else can use our website to pull all of our metrics on where accomplishments are, leveraging of funds, how we're doing with our allocations. And so we end up having this beautiful software that now police and parks and other city departments can start to utilize in tracking their awards. I see that our chair came unmuted. Is there a comment on that at all, Chair? Oh, okay. Okay. Separate from that, the only thing I'm going to wrap up my comments with is giving a huge thank you to Sue Johnson, who's been a part of our committee for a while.
About 2000
I can't hear her.
So
it's been about 50, I don't know, I've lost track, a lot of years. It'll be strange not to be part of this process. And, you know, I applaud all of you for everything you guys have done to make it. I've seen a lot of different people over those period of years, and I'm excited for those of you that are doing it. And someone else will have to be the devil's advocate questioner now that I'm gone. But keep up the good work, folks, and I'll miss you.
So a big thank you again to Sue for her commitment to the committee and for helping to allocate Everett's public funds. And so at this time, can you think of any other staff updates? We're going to give it back to you, Chair.
And you know what time it is? It's time to adjourn, but I need a motion in a second.
Why not, Chair? I motion to adjourn.
I second.
We're adjourned.
Hey, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Great to see
Have a
you.
happy holiday.
You
Happy
too.
holidays.